ahead on WRAL Triangle and Two. The NFL draft is this month. Lewis and I are going to provide a hot take before April 27th. That's the first round in Kansas City. Also, it's Masters Week. We'll go over favorites and the biggest storylines and everything you need to know with Augusta National. But Lewis, we're going to start out. We've got a national title game tonight. UConn versus San Diego State. Just like everyone thought, the floor is yours. First impressions of tonight's title game.
My first impressions are that the men's teams are going to have a lot to live up to compete with the women's teams in the women's Final Four, because we saw a fantastic tournament this weekend. Congrats to LSU, Angel Reese, everyone down there for the Tigers for a great show, great performance on Sunday for sure. As for what we're going to have with UConn and San Diego State, I have my notes here in front of me. I'm super intrigued by this because San Diego State's miracle run has been awesome. Miracle is not the right word for that. I take that back because I don't think it's miraculous that they have gotten here. They play great defense. They slow down the tempo, all of that stuff. But I do think that UConn is – the Huskies are it. The Huskies are going to do the thing. It feels like classic UConn. It's going to be a game that's going to be like a little ugly and low scoring in the first half, which it feels like it's been the case for every UConn game that has been in every UConn national title game in the past like 10 years or so. It feels like it's been like that. But yeah, I'm thinking first impression, Huskies all the way.
UConn enters as a 7.5 point favorite on the lines that I saw, Lewis. Not sure if that line has moved. That's the last time that I checked. But I will say this, regardless of the outcome tonight, I hope Lamont Butler never has to buy a drink again in the city of San Diego, because it's not just the buzzer beater shot, Lewis. It is make that shot and go to the national title game, or you lose, you miss that shot and you go home in the Final Four game against FAU.
Exactly. Well, and I'm very happy for the Aztecs, for San Diego State, because I feel like they're a basketball program that gets overlooked because they're on the West Coast, because they're in the Mountain West. But when you look back at them historically and what they've been able to accomplish over the past decade or two, they're right up there with some of the better mid-major type programs in college basketball. And especially like Kawhi Leonard went there. Like they have all kinds of talent. They just have run into some difficult situations in the tournaments and difficult matchups. They may have been able to win it all in 2020 when COVID canceled the NCAA tournament. Like that was a very good team as well. So it's exciting for San Diego State to be here. It's going to be tough. I have a stat for you, Mark Bergin. This is from David Warlock, who is the NCAA head of media coordination and statistics. Ready? Since 1985, 6 teams have reached the title game, winning by double digits in each game. Okay? Michigan State in 2000, Duke in 2001, UNC in 2009, UNC in 2016, Villanova in 2018, and UConn in 2023. Those teams are 4-1 all time in that stretch. The only loss was UNC in 2016, which required facing a Villanova opponent that may have won a game by less than double digits in there, but absolutely was tearing through the teams they faced. They beat like that Buddy Hield Oklahoma team in the Final Four by like 40 points or something crazy like that. So that almost to me feels like a bit of an anomaly in that situation. So it feels like UConn all the way.
I just feel like the Huskies really haven't been challenged in the NCAA tournament at any point. So if it happens tonight, what happens to the Huskies if they face adversity? Will they face adversity? Because double digits in every single game, like usually, Lewis, there's the team that wins the title game has to face real adversity at some point during the tournament. That just hasn't happened this season with the Huskies in their run all the way to the title game tonight.
They've been a buzzsaw through. I mean, we go back to that Gonzaga game where Gonzaga and UCLA put on like one amazing performance in the Sweet 16, and everyone's thinking, or was that, yeah, Sweet 16, and everyone's thinking, oh man, this is going to be really great. UConn can't wait to see what they do against Gonzaga. That's going to be an awesome matchup. And then it was like no contest, just tore through them. And I think part of that is the style of play. They rebound like crazy. UConn is offensive rebound percentage for them is 38.7%. So they rebound almost 40% of the offensive rebound opportunities in a game, which is ridiculously high. I think it's top 3 They shoot very well from outside. Their effective field goal percentage is great. They're top 10 in both adjusted offensive and adjusted defensive percentage. The only reason they were it's not seeded higher than 4 is because they struggled a bit in Big East play after starting off the season going really well, winning a bunch of games in a row at the beginning of the season. So I just, to me, I think part of it too is going to be because when I was looking at this matchup, I was checking, okay, how does UConn compare to Alabama? Because when we look at San Diego State and pulling off those, Herculean feats in the tournament, it's Alabama to me is one of the, okay, how did they get past Alabama? How did they take care of that? And I think a lot of it had to do with pace of play. Alabama plays incredibly fast. Their tempo is very high up there. And San Diego State loves to slow it down. UConn is just like San Diego State. They love to slow it down. UConn averages about 66 possessions per game. San Diego State averages about 65 possessions per game. So San Diego State's going to try and make it like they're going to start bringing rocks out and trying to make it a rock fight. If they're trailing in the first half of the second half, the third quarter, if you will, which is another thing, by the way, that watching a bunch of women's basketball this weekend reminded me. Let's just go to quarters. What are we doing, men's basketball? But if you try and slow it down on them and start making, bringing out sticks and rocks, just throwing things at people, UConn is ready for that. UConn can handle that. And so I just think that's going to be the ultimate difference here.
Lewis, you mentioned the styles of play. What I think of is the ball movement with UConn, and it just moves on a string, and it's a step faster than every opponent that the Huskies have played so far. And it's like they're almost playing a different sport than their opponents. Like, that's what I've noticed, because in the Final Four game, and it's just like, okay, can Miami go on a run and cut into the deficit? And every single time they had an answer, and every single time the ball was moving ahead of the defense. So that's what I noticed there. And then San Diego State, there are so many defensive metrics, but you mentioned earlier on in the tournament, holding Brandon Miller, someone who will be a first-round pick in the NBA draft, a 3 of 19 shooting. That tells me everything that you need to know in terms of the defense ability that the Aztecs bring to the table. And San Diego State in this one is just going to have to try to stick around against UConn, to where I think UConn, there's a reason why they're almost a double-digit favorite entering to tonight's game. But can you stick around, and then can you flip the lead late in the game? That would be the recipe for the Aztecs to pull off an upset tonight.
Yeah. My only concern with, or not my only concern, but one of my concerns with San Diego State too is those teams that seem to have those wild Final Four finishes. I always worry about getting the emotional letdown in the championship game. This weekend, Iowa, I think, was a prime example of it. They have that, ridiculous finish against South Carolina. They end up pulling that thing out. And then LSU comes in and puts up over 100 points on them. Like that swing in just a couple of games is so difficult. So to interrupt you, Lewis, Gonzaga in 2021 with the Jalen Suggs buzzer beater to send them to the title game. Yes. That's, in recent memory, that's what comes to my mind. That's a perfect example of it. And then Baylor starts off that championship game. I forget what it was, but they were up like 20 points, like in the first half at one point. It was ridiculous. So that's a concern. That's something that I would be worried about if I'm San Diego State. I'm sure that's something that they're talking about in the locker room, kind of, move on to the next play type thing. But that's that plus what I've seen from UConn, what they do, how they play. It feels like, the Huskies are once again going to enter a chaotic NCAA tournament and walk away on top when you least expect them to. Classic UConn.
Can I mention Adama Sanogo, fourth player to average 20 points at 65% shooting in the NCAA tournament, entering the title game in the last 40 years. And here's the company that he joins. All NBA players, mind you. 94, Corliss Williamson, Arkansas. 91, Duke's very own Christian Laettner. 1984, Akeem Olajuwon as well. Good company to be in. And Sanogo, too, like, he's fasting right now because I know he's, for religious reasons, he hasn't always been able to eat before a lot of the games, and he's still producing at such a high level. Get this man a loaf of bread, get him some water, get him some food. If he's doing this while he's fasting, Lewis, I can only imagine what he could do at full strength. He has had a heck of a tournament for the UConn Huskies.
his performance has been incredible. Just incredible. I think UConn is, like I said, I think they're going to run away with it. I'd love to talk. I mean, shout out to San Diego State. They've had some amazing stories. They made an amazing run. I think that's going to be it.
We very nearly had an all Florida finish. And it's like, I really thought it's like FAU is going to be in the championship game. Like FAU is now a basketball school in Boca Raton. And, you know, I kind of liken it to where it's like Lane Kiffin was doing his thing down there before he became the Ole Miss head coach in football. It was very nearly
go Owls. What was it? It was something like this or something. I don't know. It was go Owls.
Man. Unbelievable. Any final thoughts about tonight's title game, Lewis, before we move on to the next topic?
I'll say this, and I think we're going to talk about this on WRAL later today. At the beginning of the NCAA tournament, the testing I always go back to is the Ken Pom ranking, essentially. And with the Ken Pom rankings, I will talk my talk here for a second. With the Ken Pom rankings, since 2002, every team that has won the national championship game has had a ranking in terms of 1 through 300 and whatever, a combined total offensive and defensive of less than 50. So, for example, I'll use UConn here. Their current adjusted offensive and adjusted defensive rankings are 3 and 9. So that's 12 overall, less than 50. At the beginning of the NCAA tournament, you go through, and it's tried and true since 2002. The math is mathing in this situation. When a team is less than 50, they will win the NCAA tournament. Every team that has finished with a number less than 50. So this year, I gave 10 teams, and one of the 10 teams was UConn. So I'm not saying that is why I think UConn is going to win, although I do like being proved correct on television in some way, shape, or form. So I've said what I've said. We'll go from there. But
Lewis, here's what we'll do.
Here's
what we'll do. When the Huskies take home the title tonight, we'll play your segment on loop just to give you your flowers, because you predicted this correctly, and I know you took some grief where it's like it's too nerdy, but you were spot on in one of the teams that fulfilled that ranking.
It's not like that rank, like that situation. That it's not like unique to me. I'm not the one who came up with it, but it's a reminder for when you fill out your brackets next year. Look at the numbers and know that one of X number of teams is going to be the team that would win. Of course, UConn still has to do that tonight, but I do think it's going to be the Huskies.
All right, so Jim Nantz will be on the call tonight, Lewis. And to transition here, what a gig he has. It's his final four. And then he gets to go down to Augusta National to go do the Masters. So Ian Eagle's going to be taking over for the Final Four next year. But Nantz goes from the championship game Monday. What a sweet gig this is. All the way.
It's awesome.
Like how lucky is he to be able to say, I can do the national championship game in men's hoops on Monday night. And then come Thursday, the Masters will start and get underway, Lewis. And so what I wanted to do here was a storyline draft of ahead of the Masters this season. What would you say, I'll give you the first pick, is the number one storyline going into this weekend, the crown jewel of them all, of the four majors in men's golf and the PGA?
So I don't necessarily believe this, but I think it's what everyone will be paying attention to. It's what everyone will be watching. It's how does Tiger do? And that's just because Tiger Woods is Tiger Woods. But I don't think it is fair to put any expectations on him to do well. The last time he played was at the Genesis Invitational in mid-February. So he's been warming up. He had that horrific crash, the horrific car accident about a year or so ago. I do not think it is correct to go in there and be like, oh man, Tiger's the betting favorite, or Tiger's top 5%, whatever it might be. But for better or worse, everyone will be paying attention to him. So there you go. That's what I think people will be paying attention to the most.
That's a great pick, Lewis, because if he's even in contention headed into Sunday, everything else we talk about is going to be null and void. Now, Woods is a 60-1 long shot to win this weekend. Reason being, he's 47 years old. And you say, Mark, why does that matter? The oldest Masters winner ever, Jack Nicklaus, at the age of 46. So if Tiger does end up winning another green jacket, he'd be making history this weekend. So he's won the Masters 5 times, most recently in 2019. But remember, Lewis, like you said, last year when he was playing, he was coming off that car accident. It was one of the first tournaments he played in. But if he's even there come towards the end, that's all we're going to be talking about heading into Sunday. And I can't wait. And I'll say this too, if that happens, just your casual fan, it goes from, okay, someone who enjoys sports, someone who enjoys watching golf tour, you get the casual fan in there as well, and the intrigue and interest that he brings to the table.
Yes. What about you? What storyline you're looking at?
See, I'm between two. Let me go here. I'll go here. Can Scottie Scheffler repeat? And because speaking of Tiger Woods, he was the last guy to win back-to-back Masters, 2001, 2002. It's been a long time. So Scheffler enters as the favorite this weekend at about 13-2. He's got to try to fend off Rory McIlroy. He's 15-2. Jon Rahm 8-1. Neither Rahm or McIlroy have won a green jacket. And so I thought it was very interesting that Scheffler enters as the favorite, but just the difficulty of repeating at Augusta, where you almost have a target on your back. It's just really, really hard to do given how many talented players there are on the tour. So how does Scottie Scheffler defend last year's Masters win would probably be my selection here.
I think that's good. The notion of the back-to-back is interesting. Obviously, it's very difficult. Another storyline I'm looking at is the LIV players, essentially.
I was between Scheffler and LIV, Lewis. So go ahead.
I think it's 13 players total in the field. They make up a quarter of the non-amateur or senior players in the field. So what you're essentially looking at is, chances are you're going to get to the weekend, and one of those players is going to be in contention. So, is there some tension building there? How do people look at it? What is the coverage like? That's, to me, that will be just a very interesting, dramatic storyline. Sports is not all about the drama, but sometimes the drama does indeed make it a little bit more fun. So that would be something I'm watching for as well.
Just to make sure we've got this right for our listeners and viewers, Lewis, is 18 players from LIV as
18.
well.
There you go.
Yes. And so you're including, though, former Masters winners, both Phil Mickelson and Dustin Johnson. So if they're in contention, if they're in the mix, what is that narrative? What is that conversation like? And is that more so from the outside versus what's actually going on at Augusta National this weekend? I'd imagine everyone's going to be on their best behavior, but Lewis, the way I look at it too, I'm not sure if you've watched this Netflix documentary, this Netflix series, Full Swing, but I think that does a very good job depicting how LIV's tried to serve as this disruptor to the PGA Tour and the reason why there's tension between the two organizations.
I haven't seen. I've heard it's great, but either way, it's going to make things spicy. And when you have an event like the NCAA tournament or the Masters or whatever it might be, like one of those large scale events that are going to attract not just the people who follow every day, every weekend, but who come, or the more casual fans, you need the drama. I think the drama turns it up a notch and it makes it more fun for everyone paying attention.
And I love this quote from LIV Golf Commissioner Greg Dorman. It says he has goosebumps saying if one of his players wins, because if that does happen, it just provides more attention to what could end up being a major disruptor to the PGA Tour and how those two entities continue to coexist. That's kind of the narrative and the storyline of like kind of what makes this juicy. Let me pick one more, Lewis. What I would go is are we going to have a repeat Masters winner? So we mentioned how Scheffler was the winner last year. I look at Hideki Matsuyama in 2021. DJ won it in 2020. You had Tiger Woods in 2019, which was absolutely incredible television. Patrick Reed the year before that, Sergio Garcia. Do you have a previous winner? Are we going to be talking about someone who we don't really know a ton about said golfer's background, but someone who's either a first-time winner or this is their first major win as well? That's something where it's like, I feel like going into the last day, there's usually, the old guard of someone we have familiarity with, but then someone who's new onto the scene and going on a run. I can't wait to see that dichotomy play out this weekend starting on Thursday.
Absolutely. Agreed. And the last thing I'll pop in here, the last note I'll make, which I think in some ways kind of relates to that. This is from Patrick McDonald from CBS Sports. The past 41 major winners had a previous major top 10 finish. So that essentially you're looking at there, the most likely people to win are going to be those who have done well in previous majors. It's not exactly rocket science, not exactly something that's going to, but it's the fact that it is that consistent intrigues me. The last person to win a major without a top 10 previous major finish, 2012, Raleigh's own Webb Simpson. So there you go. Triangle and
Love
two.
the
You got to bring
local
it back to the
tie.
triangle in some way. So there you go.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's gonna be fun. Masters is always to me marks kind of like that entrance into spring. It's gonna be a fun time. Just at the very least, have it on in the background while you do stuff.
Absolutely. Final topic of the show, Lewis. NFL draft is this month. It's crazy saying that sentence out loud. This month, April 27th, Kansas City, Missouri. The Panthers have the number 1 overall pick. I'm going to give a hot take. We might do this each week. Say a hot take between now and April 27th as we get closer and closer to the draft. Here's my hot take, and you can tell me it's lukewarm, but I've teased how I think that the Panthers need to turn over every rock to see, okay, we both think it'll be C.J. Stroud, but I'd say, hey, let's take a long look at Anthony Richardson. If Anthony Richardson is still there at number 5, that's when the Seattle Seahawks pick, Lewis. I think the Seahawks, who desperately need an edge rusher, go on and take Anthony Richardson. He can sit and learn from under Geno Smith, who got a nice 3-year deal, got the contract he deserves. Not just learn from Geno Smith, but Pete Carroll, a great offensive mind who helped develop Russell Wilson and bring him along. I think it would make, I know Seattle has other needs. I know edge rusher is one of them, but I think learning from a veteran like under Geno Smith, kind of like how the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith under a great offensive mind in Pete Carroll, it makes sense, all the sense in the world, where you draft Anthony Richardson, he learns from a veteran, and you can start him once he's ready. Anthony Richardson, number 5 to the Seahawks, if he's still there. That's my take, Luis Fernandez.
I like that because I do think that it's a good situation for Anthony Richardson, right? Like we've talked about before, is something where he's going to have a chance to sit there and learn a little bit before he goes in and starts. Geno played really well last year. I think Geno will continue that play, but it's a 3-year deal. So at some point maybe you move on. Alex Smith, I think people were forgetting, was playing at an MVP level before Patrick Mahomes got the start, and then they traded Alex Smith over to Washington and put in Patrick Mahomes. So that's interesting. I do think Anthony Richardson's going to go higher than we expect. Like I do think that one of these teams is going to just be absolutely awestruck by the potential that Anthony Richardson has, at least from the very least from like an arm talent perspective, and want to do something about that. Interesting. I like that. That's a good take. I respect that. My take is hot, I guess, in some ways, because I don't think it's ever happened, or I don't think it's happened anytime recently. So my take is that we will have more tight ends drafted in the first round than we will have wide receivers drafted in the first round.
Oh,
and the reason why I say that is because you look at the top wide receivers available, right? Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Josh Downs from a UNC perspective, right? A lot of these guys are very interesting. I don't know if they necessarily have the most complete games. There's something that is going to make people go, I don't know, and worry about it. Should they? I don't necessarily think so. I'm a huge Josh Downs fan, and I think that even with his size, I think Josh Downs plays much bigger than that and can go win contested balls and things like that. But I think that's something that's going to push people. They're going to push wide receivers down people's draft board just a little bit, especially because when you look at how valuable it is to have a young wide receiver on a contract right now, especially with how much money wide receivers are starting to get in free agency, I think they're going to push them down a little bit. There's a lot of depth at wide receiver, so you can go ahead and wait and get some of these guys in the second day or early third day who could still compete for starting positions early on. When you look at tight end, also another position that has a lot of depth at tight end. I think you can go get someone like Sam Laporta in the 3rd round, and he's someone in the mold of a Greg Kittle type, not just the fact that he went to Iowa, but I think you can do that. But when you look at Michael Mayer, I think I'm saying that right,
Mayer from Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. He's a very complete wide receiver. May not have the highest ceiling as some of these folks, but he's someone who is going to be very consistent. I've seen some people compare him to Dalton Schultz from that perspective. Someone very consistent. Dalton Kincaid out of Utah, a little bit older, but has a whole lot of athletic ability. His catch ability, after the catch ability, I think is going to make some people just absolutely salivate over the potential of having him. Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State, I think, is someone who kind of falls in a similar role. Darnell Washington, I think someone is going to say, oh, he's really big. He can be a right tackle / tight end. We want him. I just see a situation where you can end up having like 3 tight ends, maybe 4, drafted in the first round, and then wide receiver, maybe it's like 2 or 3, kind of depending on what people think. Like, to me, it's all going to be, what does Green Bay do at 15? Do they go with Michael Mayer, or do they go with, like, say, if Jackson Smith and Jigba is there, do they go with him? Do they go with a Jordan Addison? That feels like a hot take for more of like the, people who follow the draft type perspective. But yes, more tight ends than wide receivers in the first round. That is my week 1 of hot takes here in April.
Let me add a little bit more fuel to your fire, Lewis. You missed out on my favorite tight end. Well, other than Washington out of Georgia, which I'm over the moon about his possibilities. Will Mallory out of Miami. When you're a tight end and you run a 4.54 40-yard dash, so like a lot of the players you named, Lewis, it's you can run past linebackers and you've got size over any defensive back that's going to guard you. You're creating matchup problems in the receiving game. And then you mentioned the extension of your offensive line. If you're nasty up front and can control the line of scrimmage, you're an extension. You're almost like an additional tackle. I like this take, Lewis. This surprised me. Mentioned Washington out of Georgia, like 6'7", like the size and speed. He can go around you. He can go over you. He can go through you. I see this, and when it pops off the tape, even if your prediction doesn't end up coming to fruition, why tight ends are valued the way that they are in the draft, Lewis, doesn't make any sense to me, because I've seen a lot of teams have success, not just having one stud tight end, but multiple tight ends because of what they can do in the receiving game, what they can do to get your running game going. It's almost a twofer. I like your take, Luis Fernandez. I like it.
Thank you. I will say, I think part of it is the value. So tight end, like year 1 tight ends are not as consistent in terms of early contributions. Yeah. Year 1 wide receivers, like we've seen, like a Jamar Chase, for example, go out there and put up ridiculous numbers as a rookie. Justin Jefferson as well. Like those type of players come and go, and you're like, okay, yeah, we could do something with that. But I think that there is not one of those types of receivers available in the first round this year. And because of that, you're going to have teams a little bit more likely to take a gamble on a tight end who may not be able to go be a Pro Bowler in year 1, but will contribute down the line. I mean, like Rob Gronkowski was not a first-round pick, but he ended up being one of, if not the greatest tight ends of all time.
Well, so it was Gronk and Hernandez when he was first starting out. It was the 2 tight end sets where I don't understand why more teams don't do this, because if the Chiefs, positional value is lower, like to me, that's a time to zag against the league if there's good players available.
Well, and the Chiefs, I think this year were interesting because they ran a lot more 22 personnel or 21 personnel, I believe is what it is. When it's you have 2 tight ends and 1 running back, or 2 tight ends and 2 running backs on the field at the same time. Part of that is because of just what their personnel was when you had someone like Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon out of the backfield. But when you have those tight ends who can be multiple, your offense becomes more multiple, and it's easier to run different plays out of similar sets. So I agree. I think plus 2, there are a lot of the tight end market this year was very interesting, where I felt like there were a lot of tight ends in free agency getting paid a lot of money when they didn't necessarily need to be getting paid that much money. So invest in young tight ends and go from there. Young wide receivers as well. But I think it's going to be that there's a lot of depth at both positions. I think that people are going to be a little more excited about the upper end tight ends versus the upper end receivers in this draft. Boom, my hot take.
Lewis, you're the absolute best. We both have UConn tonight in the title game. I hope it's a close one, and if it lives up to that San Diego State FAU finish, we are in for a treat. I want to thank you. I want to thank Capital Broadcasting Company. And Lewis, this has been another edition of WRAL Triangle and Two. If you haven't already, tap the subscribe button. Give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care, and so long, everybody.